Hello, welcome to Rappler Talk. This is Marites Vitug, and we will be discussing in a moment a very important subject. Well, a bit of good news, because last week the International Court of Justice ordered Myanmar to stop the killings and inflicting of harm on the Rohingya Muslims. And joining us is Paul Reichler, a counsel for the Gambia, which took Myanmar to court. And we hope to get more insights on this important case. Welcome to Rappler Talk, Paul. And of course, yes, and of course, to our audience, I forgot to mention that Paul was the lead counsel of the Philippines in the arbitration case against China, and he and his team took us to victory. So welcome again, Paul. And did you expect this initial victory from the ICJ?
I think the answer has to be yes. As lawyers, we don't file cases or file requests for provisional measures unless we believe in the case and the arguments and believe that we deserve to win. But I think what is particularly satisfying about the provisional measures order that was issued on January 23rd is first that it was unanimous. 17 of the 17 judges voted in favor of this, including the judge ad hoc appointed by Myanmar itself. So that in itself makes it a rather historic moment. But also, it is the content of the order. It's very, very strong. It's one of the strongest orders on provisional measures the court has ever issued, and rightly so. This is a case of genocide, and the court reacted unanimously and very strongly to order Myanmar to stop all of the activities that constitute genocidal behavior against the Rohingya Muslims, who, of course, are a population living in Myanmar. I think it's extremely important, not just, of course, for the Gambia, which brought the case, but most important for the Rohingya people, more than 700,000 of whom live in refugee camps in Bangladesh because they were forced out of the country by the genocide committed against them by Myanmar, particularly the Myanmar army, the notorious Tatmadaw. And there are still about 600,000 Rohingya living in Myanmar, in Rakhine State, near the border with Bangladesh, and they remain, as the court found, extremely, extremely vulnerable. So we hope that this order will provide them protection during the course of these legal proceedings.
But Myanmar expectedly has rejected the ruling, and in its defense, it said that they have already conducted an internal probe and that war crimes have been committed, not genocide. What do you make of this? Is this a strategy to tell the international community that, look, we're doing our own investigation, so there's no need for ICJ intervention?
Well, that argument was made to the ICJ and it was rejected 17-0, including by the judge Myanmar appointed. The fact is, this is about the 17th investigation they've conducted over the last few years, and every single one of them has been a whitewash. It's been a phony. Ambassador Bill Richardson, who, a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, was appointed to one of these, and he resigned after the first meeting because he said, this is simply a whitewash. It's a farce. I won't lend my name to this. And every single one of these investigations has had one purpose: to try to cover over the atrocities that Myanmar has committed. Aung San Suu Kyi said herself before the court something that was quite remarkable. We commend her for her candor, but what she said was horrifying. She said that under Myanmar's constitution, all of these acts of genocide or war crimes or crimes against humanity committed by the military, and that's who commits them, is the military, must only be addressed in military courts. They cannot be addressed in civilian courts in Myanmar. Now, the top 6 generals in the Tatmadaw, including several ministers of state, have all been identified by the United Nations as responsible for the genocide that's been committed. The United States government has imposed sanctions on at least 4 of them for the genocidal acts they have committed. And yet these are the people who run the courts that are supposed to enforce the law against soldiers under them, acting pursuant to their commands, who have committed genocide and the most horrendous crimes against the Rohingya people. It's a complete farce. Now, I think I'm not going to astonish your audience by discussing the specific horrendous acts that were carried out against the Rohingya people. But let me just say, they made a point of shooting infants when they didn't destroy them with the butt ends of rifle butts. They tore them out of the arms of their mothers when they were nursing and killed them right in front of their mothers. They took whole families, including children, and forced them inside their homes and then locked the doors and burned down the homes. And they did this thousands of times. This is one of the most horrendous campaigns of anti-humanity in the history of the world. It rivals those actions, the most horrendous actions of World War II. The world should be outraged, as the International Court of Justice was.
Again, the question men are asking is, how do you make this country, which seems oblivious to all this international pressure, condemnation, how can you make Myanmar comply with the orders of the court?
Well, there are certainly a number of ways. First of all, the case goes on. And if they don't comply with the orders of the court to stop their genocidal activities, they will certainly guarantee that they will lose the case on the merits at the end. And that will be an even more severe blow to them when and if that happens. But they are also subject to a reporting requirement imposed by the court. One of the most significant of the provisional measures, of course, most people are focused on the orders that they stop doing these terrible things to the Rohingya people. But one of the orders is that they report in 4 months, and then every 6 months thereafter, on all of the activities that they're undertaking to comply with the court's order. Now, if they don't report, or if they don't have anything to say about how they have been in compliance with the court's order, that will certainly affect the ultimate ruling on the merits. I should also point out, in terms of their obliviousness, to your comment about their obliviousness to the international law or international human rights standard. They were very concerned about the economic sanctions that were imposed on them by the United States and by others. And they even went to the extent of freeing Aung San Suu Kyi and allowing her to run for office. Of course, her power is extremely limited, but she is part of the government now. And those were major steps that the government took in order to get out from under the international sanctions, which punished them severely. Now, if they were to defy the International Court of Justice and to continue committing genocide against the Rohingya people, I have faith that members of the international community would respond very strongly with that and find it very difficult to continue conducting business as usual with people who not only commit genocide, but do it in violation of a unanimous order of the International Court of Justice.
So apart from sanctions, I understand that any member of the United Nations can ask the UN Security Council or the General Assembly to take action on, at least to bear pressure on Myanmar. So this can still happen.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I suspect there'll be more than one member state of the United Nations which will bring this up before the appropriate political organs of the United Nations.
And of course, China has always been pointed out as a very strong supporter of Myanmar, and China sits in the Security Council. So do you think Security Council is out as an option for enforcing or at least bearing pressure on Myanmar?
Well, there are on the 17 judges who voted in favor of this order against Myanmar. One is a Chinese judge, a very fine judge, and one is a Russian judge, a very fine judge. And I'm not suggesting that their nationality has anything to do with how they vote. But as a matter of fact, both the Chinese judge and the Russian judge on the court voted in favor of this order against Myanmar.
Also, maybe Paul, just for a basic background on the case, people are asking why Gambia, which is not directly linked to Myanmar in this dispute. No, so what brought Gambia into the picture?
It's a very interesting question, and I'll provide you with what I think is a very interesting answer. Gambia is a member of the international organization of some 57 states called the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. And it is an organization composed of states with Muslim majorities or very large Muslim populations. And the OIC became increasingly concerned about the atrocities committed against their fellow Muslims, a very vulnerable community, the Rohingya in Myanmar, particularly after the United Nations sent fact-finding missions, very prestigious fact-finding missions, 2 years in a row, 2018, 2019, to report on what actually took place in Myanmar and what actions were taken against the Rohingya people, and concluded that this was genocide. And not only that, but Myanmar's intention to continue committing genocide against the Rohingya had actually grown in the last year. So the OIC took an interest and set up a committee of its members to go to the camps, the refugee camps in Bangladesh, just across the border. And the Gambia sent a representative who was its Minister of Justice, Abu Bakr Tambadou. And he occupied a very special post because for 13 years, prior to his return to the Gambia to take up the position of Minister of Justice, he was a prosecutor in the tribunal, the International War Crimes Tribunal that was set up for Rwanda, and was prosecuting genocide cases for over a decade. So when he came to Bangladesh and the camps, along with delegates from the other OIC member countries, he was appalled. And what he said was, talking to these people and listening to their experience, hearing their pain, seeing it in their face, he said, this has the stench of genocide, and I know it well because I saw it in Rwanda. So the OIC appointed Gambia to chair, and particularly Minister Tambadou, to chair the committee that was responsible for recommending actions to protect the Rohingya. And it was the OIC committee and the OIC as a whole that decided that a lawsuit should be brought in the International Court of Justice, and decided that the Gambia should be the representative of the entire Islamic community. Now, under the Genocide Convention, any state that is a party to the convention has legal standing, has the right to bring a case against another member whom it accuses of committing genocide. Genocide is such a horrific crime that every party to the treaty, even if it is not directly affected, even if its citizens are not directly affected, has the right to bring a case to bring to justice the perpetrator of genocide. And the Gambia was selected by the OIC, and it has been honored by this selection, and I think it has acted in the most honorable manner possible, just the way the Philippines did when the Philippines brought the case against China. And I still feel the tremendous pride and the tremendous honor of having represented the Philippines in that case for some 3 or 4 years.
Yes, I read about Tambadou, and he said it's really this is just a small country which is able to make its position in the global stage by upholding human rights. And so what
Well,
I
I think,
yeah.
yeah, I think Gambia is a model. The fact is, I think another question, I don't want to say a better question, another question that I would ask is why only the Gambia? Why aren't there more states as committed as the Gambia to fight genocide, to stop it, to protect the hundreds of thousands of innocent people who remain vulnerable to this vicious government with its vicious, inhumane policy? It refuses to recognize the Rohingya as people.
What's the next step, Paul, in this case? After the issuing of orders, then you go to the merits of the case. So will you have, say, oral arguments? I mean, it's the same process as in the arbitration?
Yes, pretty much. The ICJ procedures are very similar to the procedures followed in the arbitration between the Philippines and China. First, the claimant or applicant state, in this case the Gambia, files a written pleading called a memorial. And then the respondent state, in this case Myanmar, files a response, which is called a written response, which is called a counter memorial. The court has given 6 months to each party for their first written memorials. So the Gambia's memorial is due in July, and then the Myanmar's counter memorial will be due 6 months later. After Myanmar's counter memorial is filed, there will be another round of written pleadings, and the court will determine the length of time each party will have. We would estimate, based on the court's prior practice, that each party would have 4 months. First the Gambia, and then 4 months later Myanmar. So if you add those periods, 6 months, 6 months, 4 months, 4 months, that's 20 months to get to the end of the written pleadings. And then after that, within a few months, the court will set oral hearings, which I imagine in this case will take about 2 weeks. And then after the oral hearings, really all the evidence is concluded, and the court then begins its deliberations. And it normally takes the court anywhere from 8 months to a year to issue its final judgment. So we're anticipating a final judgment in the case about 32 months from now, or just under 3 years from now. That would probably put it at around the end of 2022.
Are you looking at any, at the case of Rwanda as a precedent? Because also the Justice Minister of Gambia, as you said, was a prosecutor in the International Tribunal on Rwanda. Is that a useful or helpful case to look at to inform the current case against Myanmar?
Well, of course, we start when we look at precedents of the ICJ itself. And there are a few cases, not too many, between Bosnia and Serbia and between Serbia and Croatia. There have been very few cases brought under the Genocide Convention. Those are two that are significant. But also, as you said, and you're quite right to say it, there is precedent. There are precedents in not only in the prosecutions in the tribunal that was set up over the genocide in Rwanda, but also the tribunals that were set up for war crimes committed in Yugoslavia. And some of those cases do involve genocide. So there are a number of cases that we will cite as precedent to demonstrate that the standards for genocide, standards for proving genocide, are met in this case.
Paul, on a personal note, and this is the final question, what made you accept the case? This is the first case that you're handling that has to do with genocide, correct?
Yes.
So what made you accept this case?
How could I turn it down? I was asked by the Gambia, a tremendous honor, to be selected by the Gambia, as it was to have been selected by the Philippines a few years ago, but a tremendous honor to serve, not only to serve the Gambia, but to serve the court, to serve the cause of justice. And not only serving the cause of justice, as I try to do in all of the cases in which I appear. But in this case, you have hundreds of thousands of people whose lives are at stake, whose ability to function as human beings in their own homeland is at stake. I think any lawyer with a conscience would have accepted this role. But as you know, in my practice, I became a lawyer in the first place because I wanted to fight for justice for those who most need it and who are denied it by, let's say, superior forces or more powerful forces. I mean, I don't have any illusions about the scope of the changes that I and my colleagues can make. But whatever we can do to help these people who suffer from the most horrible injustices imaginable, whatever we can do, we must do. And that's what we're dedicated to doing.
Thank you so much, Paul, and we wish you all the best in this historic case. We will be watching, even if it takes 3 years, we'll try to follow you and the Gambia in this case against Myanmar. And thank you to our viewers for listening. We will keep you posted on this, as Paul said, historic case. It's quite unusual that 17 judges of the ICJ unanimously agreed to order Myanmar to stop the violence against the Rohingya. So
thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary.
Till next time.
Before I sign off this time, I just want to encourage all your listeners to go out and buy your fantastic book, Rock Solid. It's
okay, thank you.
A marvelous book, and I know it's gotten tremendous praise, which it deserves.
Thank you so much. So till next interview, Paul.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.